Welcome to the Therapists Uncut podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young, Jolene Daly, and Alyssa Nahara.
Welcome back to Therapists Uncut, everyone. Today, we are here to talk about an inflammatory topic about when our teens start dating. A lot of you out there just cringed, but we took it to the streets, maybe not the streets, but we took it to the teenagers and former teenagers in our lives, and we asked them some questions about this hot topic because a lot of you out there we know, just as us, are dealing with their kids starting to enter into the dating world. And while it may or may not be terrifying for some of you, probably fun for others, it's definitely a transition that deserves some time and attention, because you mess this one up, you mess some major things up. So no pressure.
Can I just say that I'm typically not nervous when we record, but as Nikki was introducing this topic, I started feeling more and more nervous because Nikki and I, we have teenagers who dated, and it's kind of terrifying. And now I'm feeling nervous. So what we would like to do is we would like to inform all of our listeners about the things that we have learned about teen dating, and especially the feedback that we got from interviewing the other teens about what parents should know about teen dating.
It's funny because when Nikki said teen dating, I was going to go, dun, dun, dun.
And that would have described the intense feeling in my body right now.
And think about to when we were kids, like it wasn't a big deal, but now it's like,
it wasn't a big deal when you guys were dating with your parents. Like, I did not have positive dating.
Oh, I meant like for you personally.
Oh,
well,
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
dating for yourself is not a big deal. It's just,
yeah, exactly.
But as a parent and your teenagers start dating, it's, oh my God, what in the world is going to happen next?
Yeah, so my wife, we had to work on her face because, you know, the kid would start to talk about boys in a very casual, innocent way. And the face did like these weird contortions that aren't natural. So we had to really talk and work on, if you want the child to talk to you about boys going forward, we have to fix the face. So the wife has done significant work on her face, plastic surgery, just, you know, controlling the emotional reactions.
It's good to know that therapists respond very similar to other individuals. So therapists' children are maybe different than other children. However, therapists in the parent role is probably pretty similar, because I work with a lot of adults that I have to tell them, you can't like smack your forehead when your kid is talking about something if you want your kid to continue to talk to you.
And a little disclosure.
Hilarious.
Yeah, little disclosure, guys. I may or may not have interviewed our 18-year-old who just turned 18, and that was the most vulnerable experience for everybody involved. And you guys get to hear all about it. With his permission, of course. Hey, AJ.
Big shout out. Thank you, AJ.
And also, is AJ taking applications for the next? Because I mean, he sounds like a really cool kid.
I mean, I'm a little biased, but I feel like my kid is fairly well-rounded after hearing his answers. So let's get started with some of the questions that we did ask the teens about what should parents know about teen dating? What is important to know in teen dating in this generation?
All right. So first off, we wanted to clarify what dating was, right? Set some definition. So for us, we recognize it might be a little different than how our teens and our youth would describe dating. So we took it to the streets and the kids, and I said, what does that mean? What is dating? Here's one response. 15-year-old. Dating, from what I've seen or heard, is like going to the movie or the mall and just hanging out with the other person. I love it. Poor COVID kids. It could look differently with COVID, but mainly just spending time with each other. School also has a lot to do with it, because you're able to see the other person every day, except if they don't go to the same school. Dating means that you and your, quote, crush like each other. I love this. And the Google definition of dating is a stage of romance between two people who meet socially.
Is that the Google definition you looked up, or a kid provided you with that?
A kid's response. They reference Google. I love it.
Because they're trying to figure it out too. Like, who's not Googling how to date when you're 15? That's hard.
Okay, so I'll be honest. I have a dog child. I have a furry child. I do not have a teen child. So I do not know, but wouldn't you want your children to come and ask you what dating is rather than Googling it?
So first of all, I thought we were about to hear about your dog's dating adventures, but yes, and that's a big, parenting in general, right? Because technology and the web and the Google, as my dad calls it, is at their fingertips, right? So how much of this are they, if a parent is not actively involved in monitoring and continually in conversation with their kids, they're getting this information off Google.
Can I tell you that one of the definitions I heard of teen dating was one that I admired, because it was really about them spending alone time together is more the exception. The norm would be they're going on group dates, they're going to the family's house, they're hanging out and watching a movie, they're having dinner with the parents and the siblings, and they're all getting to know each other. And then the feedback was also in this person's experience that when I saw that happening, those relationships actually lasted longer than my friends who were dating and actually spending a lot of alone time with their significant other, because they just didn't last very long.
And that was a young person's response, right?
Yes.
That they were their observation was that those people that were pulling in other aspects of their life into their dating world, not just exclusive alone time with that one person, they observed that those relationships lasted longer, right?
Correct.
It does kind of make sense, because you all see those people that come back and they have this vacation romance or something along that lines, and then it fizzles out, so because reality and this kind of fake world, whatever it is that you decide to be in, are two totally different things.
Yeah. And Nikki and Jolene, did you guys get any responses on here's a list of don'ts as parents when I start dating?
Yes, we did.
What were some of those responses?
We had some that had siblings, so they were maybe the older sibling and there was younger kids around, or older kids, and the feedback was, can you help me get some protection from my siblings? Because younger was just annoying or whatever, older was embarrassing, intentionally trying to get me, make me uncomfortable. So actually asking parents for assistance in kind of a buffer. And not that, and this ties back to what Alyssa had just said, not that they didn't want to spend time around the family, but in that context, can you please talk to my siblings
about some appropriate boundaries?
Which, interesting enough, the parents weren't identified as the embarrassing piece. It was the siblings. So
I think that's funny, because I can say that's probably one thing that any individual teenager dating, whether they're older now or a teenager, can agree with. So I'll throw myself under the bus. I was not the nicest younger sister when my sister started dating. And actually, it was when my sister started dating her husband, who she is still married to.
He weathered the storm.
I was not the nicest person. I do remember a time he came to visit the house, and we lived in one of those older houses. So we had those screen doors that had the latch kind of thing. So I opened the door and the screen door is always locked. And so he says, "Hey, is your sister home?" And I'm sure he was assuming, I'm going to unlock it. Nope, I shut the door and went upstairs and told my sister he was here.
Poor guy.
I love it.
I was so cruel.
I had some moments too. So my sibling, for the most part, dated the same guy all through her high school and even college, I think, years. But they had taken a brief break at one point, and so she had a couple dates in the meantime. And she brought this guy over. Now we're country folk for the most part at that point, and lived out in the country on a ranch, rural area. And anyway, she brought this boy over for dinner, and I've never seen a belt buckle that big. I mean, that was just unnecessary. Like it spanned the width of his entire body. It wasn't even like you would think the guy was some rodeo extraordinaire, but he was not. High school quarterback. And he walked in the door, and I just started laughing. And my parents gave me the stink eye, and so I removed myself from the situation and got it together and came back. And then halfway through dinner, somebody asked him to pass the broccoli or whatever the heck we were having. He kind of stood up a little bit to do that, and his belt buckle caught on the table, and it lifted the entire table up about 6 inches, and all the plates went sliding. And at that point, I didn't bother trying to hide it, and I just started cracking up at the dinner table. He never came back over. That was it. But I think that was probably one of my finer moments as a sibling. I just remember the look on her face. She was absolutely
mortified.
Yeah, that was a good word for it.
That's hilarious.
Mortified. But that's what little siblings do sometimes.
Yes.
And then there are the older ones that are like super intimidating and try to scare off the other people and make it really difficult. So parents, if you could just be mindful of the kind of personalities that your kids have, and when one of those kids start dating, maybe try to establish some household agreements on what it's like when whomever they're dating comes to the house or when they go out on these dates. So that way we decrease the risk of these mortifying moments.
I guess that's unless the family doesn't like the individual, and then you might want to change that tactic.
And then they're going to employ the siblings as their little helpers. But I mean, personally, our oldest had recently had her first relationship, and the youngest was very protective. And so navigating that as a parent, we had to really address how that's not necessarily a bad thing to be protective. I mean, it was there were some positive qualities in that, but also helping her to balance how to not embarrass her sister, and how her sister's older than she is, and she might reach some of these milestones before she will. And it was just the oldest starting to have her first relationships was not just a milestone for her, but also for her sibling. It was a tremendous life event for our youngest. Mom, they're holding hands on your lawn. What are you going to do? Literally a statement that came out of her mouth. So
that's so funny.
But really, how do you balance these things as your kids start to date and validate certain concerns and values? It's just a balancing act.
It goes back to communication. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that's been a theme for a couple of adolescents or a little bit older adolescents that we talk to, is communication. Communicate with me. Let me know this. Let me know that. So it's interesting as an older adult where a lot of what I hear is I don't really hear what my parents have to say, yet then there's these people that are a little bit over the age of 18 that are saying, hey, I wanted to communicate with my parents. I just maybe didn't know how to present that I wanted to communicate. So it goes about along the lines of communication, whether it's with the other sibling or the one who's dating.
Communication was a common theme that came up amongst all the teens that we talked to. How you go about that communication is really important because, like Nikki said, you want to check your face. You don't want to scare them off as they try to tell you about their new crush. One of the comments that I got was, please don't be a helicopter mom. What? And that may or may not have been for my own child. And I could imagine, I mean, I'm my kiddo's bonus mom. So, and I know his mom, and his mom's a great mom. May have been a little helicopter parenting in one or both of our mothering styles. And his feedback was, don't be a helicopter parent. Like, give me some room to grow. Give me some room to make good choices and be responsible and show you that you can trust me. Right? So give them a little space and just trust they're going to do good with it.
But it was interesting with that because we did get some of those responses that, hey, give us space. But a lot of the teens followed up with, we want you to know what's going on, but we don't want it to be such an inquiry focused interrogation style. Like, we want it to be, we're growing up, we want it to be more of a conversation. We want it to be more of a relationship with you, and that we're sharing these things. And that was interesting because that was a common thing. I'm sure there's teens out there that is not the case. It just so happens that our access to teens is a lot of our friends and family and such who are also therapists, so that might play a role in this. But it was interesting in how they described it. We even asked some older individuals who are in their early 20s, looking back, if I had to pick something, it would be our communication about things. For me personally, I hold a lot of things and emotions in and didn't know how to show or express them. I know my parents would talk to me about anything, but I never felt comfortable starting that conversation. And I never felt like they were comfortable starting it with me. As I've gotten older, it seems much easier. I found the words for these conversations. But as a kid, I think it's important to have parent and child communication, especially to keep that close bond. So this is somebody who's in her early 20s reflecting back on her youth. And again, it's communication.
There are transition times when you can help your kids group date, and that's acceptable based on the age. So if you're allowing your 13-year-old, your 12-year-old to group date, movies, mall, things along that lines, outside of the COVID era, then you have to start talking to them at that age. Then as you transition and they become older, your transitioning and parenting style then changes. And it's not so much telling them. In certain situations, you have to allow them to make the choices and unfortunately kind of fall.
I have an aunt and uncle who have I don't know, in their mid 70s now. They've been together since they were 14 or 15. I love their story, but that is the exception. Most of the time, there's going to be some heartbreak. There's going to be breakups. It's not, as a parent, you're going to hurt. You're going to see this and not want your kid to go through it, but you gotta let them.
You do. And the communication piece is so important because, and the feedback we got from the teens, and these are teens ranging from 13 to 18, think about 19, early 20s, is it's not a comfortable topic to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about the sex talk. Please don't call it the sex talk, by the way, because you're just going to freak the hell out of your kids and it's not going to go anywhere.
Running for the hills.
But you do need to talk to them, right? We just got a teen telling us about, here's Google definition of dating, because if you're not talking to your children about dating, about consent, about healthy relationships, where do you think they're getting their information? And where do you want them to get it from? They need to get it from a credible source like you.
They're getting it from Google. They're getting it from their friends at school. And who knows where their friends at school are getting that information. Going kind of along with what you shared, one of our other responses when we asked a youth, I think 16, what you wish your parents knew about dating, their response was, I really think parents should know that just because we're younger doesn't mean that we aren't still two humans who have feelings for each other. And trust that your teen is going to do the right thing because not every teen is, quote, the typical teen. Also, just because it's not somebody the parent is interested in doesn't mean that it's not somebody that your child isn't interested in. Pulling them apart is only going to make them want to be closer. So that's very, very insightful for someone of that age. One, recognizing that, hey, just because I'm not an adult yet doesn't mean my feelings aren't real. And I think that's huge because a lot of parents, when they start, oh, you're just, this is puppy love, you're just a kid, da, 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 da. This is when they're learning what love is. They're learning what relationships are. Their definition of like and love at that age is not going to be the same as yours, but this is when they're developing what that is. So rather than shut it down, why don't you help them learn?
Learn what a healthy relationship is. Learn what
Absolutely.
Healthy love is. Don't learn what that love is hitting or love is yelling or love is cussing or things along that lines. They're only going to learn those things from you, or they're going to learn them from Google and their friends.
Or that love is because you have the best six pack and, we take the best selfies together. I mean, because at that age, if you shut your kid down, as this teen told us, it's not going to pull them apart. It's only going to make them want to be closer. Okay. So you shutting it down is not going to shut down their feelings. It's not going to shut down what they're going to do. They're just going to get sneaky about it. So if you want to be able to guide your child along this path and help them figure out, one, who they are and how to have healthy, loving relationships, if you can be communicative with them about this and not in an authoritarian, this is what you're going to do way, but more of a conversation, setting boundaries, but letting them also find their way within those, then you're going to have an influence. That is when you're going to be able to help guide your child.
You guys can remember back when you were a teenager and dating. Absolutely. That was going to be the first person that I was going to go and try to be around, is the one that my parents did not like.
And I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yep.
Typically, our parents were right, though. Mine were usually right, actually, man. But you don't think that when you're a teenager.
Right. And there's that. I think there's two different ways that could go wrong. There's the path you just described where, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want and date the guy you don't want me to date. And then there's also, I think, which can go just as wrong, the path where the kid completely acquiesces to parents' demands, expectations, etc., and they don't ever figure themselves out. So they might toe the line and they might walk the tightrope, but what have they learned? They haven't learned to think for themselves. They haven't learned to make their own decisions, figure out what life is, because then what happens when all of a sudden parents aren't there and they have this world and all they've ever known is what I was supposed to do? It delays their development and it delays their ability to be able to make those decisions in the world.
And those heartbreaks that you would want them to have in your home so that you can help them process through healthy ways to process through heartbreak, they're now going to have in their 20s, and they're going to make even poorer choices, and they're going to affect more people. And this is going to become part of who they are as a person. So how do you want them to develop? Do you want to continue to watch them stumble after relationship because you're too nervous or scared or don't know how to start a conversation about dating and sex and all of the things that go along with that?
It's not going to be easy, but right now they are in your home where you can love and support them through that, right? Like Jolene said, if they don't have to learn those skills until they're moved out and on their own, they're not necessarily going to have that support. And also the damage could be significantly greater to themselves and to others because, you're now older, there's more at stake.
This is the time to help them evaluate on what their values are, and knowing that all the values that you've been teaching them throughout their entire life is now going to come out in the relationships that they choose to be a part of, whether it's whom they're dating, whom their friends or peer groups are, what their work relationships like. Relationships are everywhere in our life, and you have to decide how you're going to open up these conversations about the values that define them and how they want to choose relationships based on those values.
I like that you say that, Alyssa, because how do you know? You can't tell them and tell them and tell them and tell them and have them keep those values. You have to show them. You have to teach them. You have to walk with them as they implement it. Otherwise, it's going to go right out the window when they move out.
And to recognize that your child may not have exactly the same values as you. And is that bad? Right? So you can give them, I always go back to bowling, right? You give them their bumpers and you kind of try to teach them to stay kind of within those and to give them freedom and let them figure out who they are, but also setting boundaries, right? We're not suggesting that you just let your 15-year-old have a free-for-all and whatever they want to do, but setting boundaries that give them the freedom to discover who they are, but also recognizing that, and it may not be big, it might be smaller, it might be larger, but compared to the freaking election recently, right? Do you want your kids to vote or to align with who you are going to vote for just because that's what mom and dad or mom and mom or whatever do? Or do you want them to think for themselves and establish their own values that then they are going to live by? And maybe they don't 100% align with yours, but you kind of teach them how to discover who they are, and healthily so, right?
How to think for themselves. I like the bumper analogy because I can visualize two different types of adults. The adults that have been taught how to get like the strike or the spare or get the majority of the pins, and the adults that fly all over the lane.
So communicate with your teen. Open up those conversations, even if they might feel uncomfortable. Put it out there like, yeah, this isn't a comfortable conversation to have, but it's an important one, and it's one that I would like to be a part of if you'll allow me to. So open up the conversations and focus on the values.
So specifically, what does that look like? Because a lot of parents struggle with that. Okay, you want me to talk to my teens about this stuff, but when they mention a girl, boy, whatever, I want to run and hide under my pillow. And not every parent feels that way. I mean, I know a lot feel comfortable having that dialogue with their kids. So this episode is not so much for those who feel comfortable being open about these things. But this episode is really for those parents, aunts, uncles, caregivers out there who just don't feel comfortable with this.
Or feel really angry that their child is dating, and they might want to not run and hide under a pillow, but run and find out who this kid is and figure out what all their intentions are. You got to control that, right? Really got to be able to control that.
So like, let's talk about, first of all, if it is to the point where it is impairing you guys' relationship, it might be time to talk about going and seeing a family counselor for a little while, kind of working through some of this. But if it's something you guys can work through at home, what are specifics? What does that look like? So for example, I gave a personal example where, and I'm one who's tends to be pretty comfortable talking about these things with the kids because it's just a value that I have. I want them to be open and feel comfortable. My wife's face was a major deterrent in the beginning. So that is an example of controlling your bodily reactions, because the minute the kid sees that, they're going to shut down. I mean, I put myself in a kid's shoes. If I was trying to go talk to an adult about this, if they're reacting physically, I'm going to shut down. And I'm going to get out of that conversation as quickly as possible. And I'm not going to come back to you because that was too much attention. That was embarrassing. Right. So inviting conversations. And so how can you do that? You can ask open-ended questions. One of our teens or our former teens, our young adults, said they wish their parents had approached them about it because they wanted to share that information, but they didn't know how to start the conversation. Alyssa, I know you had a teen share with you, I want to talk about these things, but don't grill me, essentially.
So here's what you can do is you can shut up and listen. You're going to have so many questions. You're going to have so many things that you want to ask. Do I know this person? What about their family? Where do they come from? Where do they live? So many questions, but hold your questions. So 1, listen, and 2, ask for permission to give your opinion or ask questions because it gives them a little bit of control in this conversation. After they share everything, say, would you like my opinion? And your teen has the power to say, no, not right now. Okay, so hold it.
So the only thing that you're allowed to say is, okay, tell me more. What happened there?
And I found this one is powerful. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes.
Because it makes your kid think things through. You know, how did you feel about that? And the more open you can be in terms of not shutting them down or not interrogating them, but you can be inquisitive. I like that word, right? Inquisitive, passively inquisitive. They're going to become more and more comfortable just coming to you about these things, right? It's not going to be just casual curiosity. And if you can have those conversations and at least fake it that you're comfortable in that, 1, you're going to get more comfortable, but 2, your kid is going to get more comfortable coming to you. And then there's not going to be as many secrets. There's not going to be as many hidden concerns. And this one might scare you, but then what happens when your kid does get comfortable and they then come to you and share something that scares the hell out of you? Maybe it's, I don't know, sexual in nature or just something that, holy crap, okay, and you're now terrified in that moment. Continue to control your face, your body, your verbal reactions, and continue to be curious. Because heads up, people, your kid just came to you and shared that information. Hello.
Now, in addition to communication and values, social media was another topic that really hit hard for all of the teens and young adults that we talked to. So now let's talk about what is important to be aware of when your teen is dating in an era of social media.
Social media and texting. So I got a nice education in some text codes, emojis, things along that lines that parents might not necessarily 100% understand.
Okay, just to clarify for all of our listeners, Jolene just this morning learned about the eggplant.
No, not the eggplant. The other things that are,
Okay.
There are
and if you don't know what the eggplant is, I know we told you we don't want your kids Googling it, but you're an adult. Google it. What is the eggplant?
We talked about checking your face. Jolene's face right now is not a face she would use while having this conversation with the teenager. Because it's a lot to take in when you think you know some things as an adult and you're like, shit, I didn't know anything about this stuff.
that's the reason that I brought this part up right here, is because this is a really good way to practice your faces. So go to your computer, Google it, turn on your camera, and then scroll through all the that they're giving you. And then that way you can learn to practice your facial expressions, because
I should get one.
there are emojis for penis, butt, vagina, ejaculation, oral sex. There are emojis for all of those things that you're not necessarily going to associate. I would not associate taco with vagina.
Really? Taco?
Oh, come on.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. I'm not saying that. I'm not like that. But if your kids, typing away and telling their friends something, or maybe
Jolene would like, they want Taco Bell.
Right.
I mean,
They just wanted some tacos, a little side of veggies. Fine.
not something that they use.
I'm glad Jolene is Googling this, because you know what? Otherwise she would just think that the niece wanted a pet when she saw the emoji of a kitty cat.
Okay, so there's an emoji for a sexual desire sent in response to nude pics. There's an emoji for breast and testicles. There's an emoji for weed. There's a short word acronym for bitch, which I was really interested in. That could be used in a bullying situation as well.
What is the acronym?
BIH.
So of course our generation just takes out 2 letters and then
Right.
we're good to go.
So CD9.
Can't just type the whole thing.
No, CD9, KPC, POS, PIR, and PAW are all.
Are you spelling a
acronyms.
word?
No,
I was like trying to spell it out in my head.
Oh, those are all separate.
So those
Okay,
are all
I was like,
separate.
oh, I can't keep track. I forgot what she said.
Okay, so
POS
Jolene
is a piece of shit. But
I can take POS. I can handle POS. But these other ones, are you going to tell us what they mean?
Yeah, those are all acronyms for parents in the room or parents looking over or something along that line.
Oh, so POS is parents over shoulder, not
yes.
piece of shit.
Wow. And we thought we knew what we were talking about.
Damn. See? We just got edumacated.
And we've got a plethora. I feel like we've got a good age range in this group here, and we are still not in the loop of this lingo. So parents, get familiar with the words that your teens are using.
A good age range and individuals who work with teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot of experience.
Wait, time out. A good age range? Are you guys indicating that I'm like 12?
I'm the middle child. I'm just saying. I know that Nikki is younger and Jolene is older. That's all I know.
This is really weird because I'm not used to being the oldest in the group. And I am now the oldest in the group.
We have so much experience, personal and professional experience. And a lot of this stuff is new to me. So parents, get educated on what terms your kids are using, what emojis mean when they go through their phone. Do not stalk their phone and invade their privacy. But yeah, you want to have boundaries around the phone too. So just be really aware around this lingo. Can I say that when that song, it goes down in the DM, it goes down. When that came out, I was like, what the fuck is a DM? Did anybody know what that was?
Yeah, everybody's sladding, and I don't understand where
I still
the terms...
Sorry, still don't know what that is. Oh,
direct messages
okay.
on like Instagram, etc. But I don't understand how, like, when did people started sliding into DMs? Like, I don't.
Oh, no. It's going down in the DM.
It's going down in the DM.
Right. It's sexual in nature.
Sliding into my DM. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
A lot going on again. So what other terms came up? Because we did ask the teens that we interviewed, like, what do we need to know? What is the lingo that's being used either in social media and text or in dating that would be foreign to us? The other one that came up was, I thought I was actually pretty hip. I'm not, because I don't know what any of this shit was. So, okay, she ghosted me. She left me on deliver, which means...
So the ghosted one I knew, but just in case people out there didn't know, ghosted means, per another teen, somebody was there for like a date or something, so that they had to go to the said that they had to go to the bathroom and left. So essentially you just poof, you're gone. That was that was an extreme example. I think also people have been texting and then bam, all of a sudden no response, you got ghosted. Okay, continue, because I had not heard these next ones.
Yes, we are going to be providing definitions because we're old as fuck, apparently. She left me on deliver, meaning like here she didn't even open that shit. They didn't even care enough to open my text. All right. So the other one was she left me on open or left me on red. And I was like the color red? What does that mean? No, red, R-E-A-D. I can't even spell over here. Left me on red, meaning they opened it, but they didn't respond. So obviously they don't want to talk to me.
I think that one made me laugh the hardest because I was like, red, green, yellow, red,
Right?
stoplight, what?
For the longest time, I thought it was they left me unread, not read.
Because that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But nothing makes sense when you're not a teenager, apparently. What other lingo came out in these interviews that parents should be aware of actually has meaning?
I think they need to be aware of, so not necessarily just words, but what happens in certain apps. So on Instagram, a lot of kids have a Finsta account. So it's an account that they don't allow parents to see. And they, that's where the down low happens. That's
why is it called Finsta?
It's a fake Instagram account. Okay. So
I'm so proud of you right now, Julie.
I know, right? And then, so Snapchat, I got a lesson in Snapchat from one of my nieces. So Snapchat, you send messages, and once you exit out, the message is gone. So pictures, things along that lines, nothing sticks around. And
shout out for parents, Instagram now has that same feature. So if you think everything, heads up to parents, disappearing messages. Continue, Julie.
Okay. So then if you send a picture to somebody on Snapchat and they take a snapshot of it, even if they take it on their camera, it'll tell you that they've taken a snapshot of it. So it's not like you can kind of go in and trick your kids and kind of look at things and snapshot things. Yeah, I can't do any of that stuff.
Not that we're encouraging you to poke around in their privacy, guys. But we do want you to be aware of the applications that your teens are using and knowing that social media is super public. When people start dating, it's a public thing for a lot of these teens, and there can be a lot of pressures that come with that.
And depending on age also, right? So I know a lot of, and everybody has different values around this, but a lot of families are allowing younger children to have devices than, say, maybe when we were growing up, where you got a phone when you needed one, when you were going to be at practice and parents needed to get a hold of you, et cetera. So there are families, and I can support certain instances where parents have access to phones. All right. I know Alyssa's saying don't poke around and stoop. I personally also think that having access to those accounts is important at certain age ranges and with certain situations, but being upfront about it, right? So, child, here's your account. I will have access to this account. The more you show me you can be responsible, the less I am going to check in. Rather than, it's 10:52, I think they're asleep. Is their phone on the charger? Let's tiptoe into their room and see what they've been doing. That's bullshit, right? But being open and upfront, hey, you show me you can be responsible, then we phase out. But especially with a lot of these younger kids having access to technology and apps. I mean, even simple games that, back in the day we'd play a game and that was just us playing a game. Now they have access to all of these online networks and everything. So I think there is some supervision has a place.
It's that transitioning parenting again. You don't give your child, a 10-year-old, free range to Snapchat and all of these internet sources. You have to help them learn to use it. And as they transition and get older and show you that they're more and more responsible, you back out. Because you're going to have to back out when they go to college. You're not going to have a choice.
Right? We don't advise checking your 19-year-old's text messages to monitor their conversations. But on the younger side, this is where you're gonna teachable moments and controlling yourself and how you respond. So let's say you do have a youth that is of the age where you support monitoring of some sort, being upfront about it, not being creepy about it. How do you, because it's not going to be effective if you investigate, get them in trouble, have consequences, all of this stuff. They're just, they're going to delete shit. and you're never going to see it, right?
They're very
So-
smart. Just remember
Right?
that.
Oh,
Very
so how?
smart.
Now I know, Alyssa. Maybe we should kind of go back and forth on this, because I know earlier you had said don't look, but is there a place where you can see monitoring those things? But how do you make it a conversation so that they are not then hiding things, deleting things? Can it be a, hey, I noticed in this conversation, as you know, occasionally we check in just to see how you're handling yourself online or handling yourself with your friends. If there's something that's concerning enough that you need to address it, how can you do that where it's still a conversation?
Well, let me start with saying I agree with the more you show me you can be responsible, the less I'm going to have oversight on this. And it reminds me exactly of our family's a big Dave Ramsey fan. So if we have any Dave Ramsey listeners out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's an analogy of a rope. Every time you can show me you can be responsible, I'm going to give you a little more rope. And every time you do not show me you're responsible, I'm going to pull that rope in. I'm going to have more oversight, and you're going to lose privileges because you're not being responsible. So I would absolutely say, dependent on, consider your kiddo's track record, though. If they have never given you a reason to not trust them, do not accuse them. Do not give them the oversight that makes them feel like, why can't you trust me? Because that's going to be a huge barrier in your communication. So if you do happen to come across something like, yeah, open it up in a conversation. Hey, remember a few months ago when you got your cell phone, or we talked about you having an Instagram or a Snapchat, we talked about the agreements around what that would look like. And I told you that I'd be checking in every now and then. Well, when I did, this came up and I want to talk to you about it. And let's just have a conversation.
And
Do
then
not accuse them of anything, though. Truly have a conversation.
I like the rope analogy, because what's going to happen is, again, they go off to college, they move out, they do whatever. They're taking their rope with them.
Yes.
And if you didn't teach them how to use the rope, they're going to hang themselves.
and remaining curious, right? So like Alyssa said, do not go in swinging with accusations, because surprise, sometimes you're going to be wrong. Sometimes things are not as they appear, but in the case that they are, you go in with accusations and coming in hot. It's not.
All of you who have been listening before know that we don't like assumptions. So don't assume.
Right. I mean, no assumptions. They make an ass out of you and out of me, as one of my favorite professors always said. But, and for those of you who are super confused, like write the word down and then step, yeah. But what is I've heard a common thing. Well, we've talked about a lot of different aspects of teen dating and different concerns, but really the common thread for me is communication. But healthy, open communication where you're really teaching your kid how to grow up, because that's what they're doing. And they're going to do it. They're going to grow up whether or not you want to let them. They're either going to grow up doing exactly what you don't want them to do because you pushed them that direction. They're going to grow up doing exactly what you want them to do, and they're not going to learn to think for themselves. Or we can, and obviously there's more than just these three options, or you can give them the tools and teach them the tools that they need to grow up healthy, learn healthy relationship skills, learn what they want in a relationship. And these are all teachable moments, regardless of what aspect of teen dating, whether it's you saw something on their Instagram that was concerning, or whether they come home and tell you they're sliding into somebody's DMs, or whatever it is. These are all teachable moments.
And please don't go home and say, well, I heard that means this, because that's an accusation and an assumption. Please clarify with your child or your teen what is truly happening before you start jumping to your own conclusions. And I would agree, everything is a teachable moment. There is decades upon decades of research on child development and adolescent development and how to parent and things I wish I would have known. And even with that research, we still sit here as parents and we're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing half the time. And that's okay. You just have to do the best you can in that moment. And the themes that I heard come up are communication, values, and teaching them independence.
And, this whole episode has been dedicated to dating in general. I just feel it's important to throw out there to keep in mind that your male son may not date his female counterpart, and vice versa. And that's a whole nother episode, because a lot of parents are going to really struggle with that, or not support it or not allow it. But if you are a supportive parent, this kind of fits within this episode, that don't make assumptions there either, right? Ask open questions. Ask the questions and show in your communication patterns the support that will allow your child to come to you regardless of who they're interested in.
Yes, listen, don't make assumptions, ask permission, and ask open-ended questions.
Communication. Just
I'm
all
sorry,
of it
Jolie,
goes back to
I didn't get that. Can you say that one more time? Okay.
Say it louder for the people in that.
That is the big component in any relationship. It doesn't matter. When we say relationships, it means every possible interaction with another human being. That is a relationship. So it's really important for you to remember that sometimes you have to teach relationships. Sometimes you have to relearn relationships. Sometimes you need a little extra support.
Relationships are not easy. And if you find that you do need extra support, you've got 3 practices here who can help you. And you can contact us. We can connect you with other providers in the area so you can find somebody who fits you. But for information about my practice, you can find info at smalltowncounselingca.com.
My practice is at dailymft.com.
Because it's Jolene Daily. Sorry. And for our practice, you can find us at catalystcounselinginc.com.
We want to thank all of the teens who are open to talking to us about this huge topic. We appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to talk about something that's important for a lot of parents to hear. So thank you. And for all of our listeners, thank you for joining us today on the Therapists Uncut podcast. We appreciate you letting us into your lives. And we will see you back next Monday on the Therapists Uncut podcast.
Have a great week.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.